Ladies and gentlemen, I'm Aisyah as one of the authors of this research. I am delighted to be here today to tell you about immigrant acceptance issues on the campaigns of five French presidential candidates in 2017. Let's now turn to the background of the research. Immigration in France is described as a mass movement in which the majority of them are people from developing countries who move there for a better opportunity. There were politically divided attempts from the early 1970s until today regarding the immigration. The debate over the issue of immigrants continue and affect the social and economic life of the French people, especially since the immigration crisis that occurred in Europe. France has a political party system which allows complex coalition in various policy areas, and it allows the winner of a general election to fully lead the government, thus making all the partisan groups in France using social issues, local culture, and economy to gather supporters in national election. The last French presidential election was held on 23 April and 7 May in 2017. As no candidate won a majority in the first round, a second election was held between the top two candidates, Le Pen and Emmanuel Macron. The finding shows that the right-wing candidates, Le Pen and Fillon, use it to associate immigrant groups with negative representations. It could be taken as a signal how divided the perception in France is due to immigration. However, the choice of words used by the three candidates from the left and the center tended to be very close to emotion and humanity appealing. Based on the word choices table and citations, we further found two major aspects in the rhetorics related to political discourse and related ideology. The first finding is power relations and identity from the right-wing candidates. Words like oppression, pluralism, insecurity, nightmare, shame from the right side imply that France is afraid of immigrants, and means that immigrants here have their own power to change France culturally and nationally. Therefore, it can be inferred they see the immigrant as a threat, and the immigrants are the one who have power here. This is evidenced by the closed border policy and the wish to leave the European Union and Schengen area proposed by Le Pen and open conditionally controlled border by Fillon. Also, he didn't further elaborate other immigration program which is useful for helping immigrants. Meanwhile, for the identity findings, Le Pen described the identity of immigrants as terrorists. Fillon described immigrants as the cause of the economic downturn. Le Pen used negative words such as nightmare, tragedy, as if she wanted to form an imaginary that immigrants are a nightmare for France. In one of her rhetorics, she then issued an example of the Charlie Hebdo terrorist attack in 2015 carried by immigrant groups with Muslim backgrounds, namely Sharif and Said Kouachi and Abi Coulibaly. This was deliberately done by Le Pen as an example of generating emotion in order to have a really real effect on how threatening immigrants were to the French at the time. The second finding is for the other two left and one center swing candidates. Among and Mélenchon, they are open and controlled, but have several other programs help the immigrants enter and integrate safely and comfortably. They also tend to use emotionally appealing words such as war, misery, force, exile, evils, and humanitarian distress. Meanwhile, for the centrist Macron, he used sympathetic words like they are in difficulty and we should help them. But at the same time, he sees them as an opportunity for the economy and realized that the terrorist threat coming from them is unavoidable. Thus, should implement conditionally controlled open border and integration class policy. This can be inferred that the left and the center candidates see the immigrant as a group pressured by unfavorable circumstances and their position is beneath the French society. Thus, they believe in the notion that they can control them. The identity aspect we find is that Among and Mélenchon describe immigrants as being oppressed, so they need to help them as a humanitarian help, while the centrist Macron see them as an opportunity. In this point, we see that the power relations and the identity play a huge part in the five presidential candidates. And the power relations that marks as the rhetoric words that come from these important figures to target the supporters can influence how society defines the immigrants, thus forming an immigrant identity, as we can see on the mentioned graphic. Now we move to the third finding. Since the refugee crisis in Europe, it has become a one complex issue mixed with politics, economy, and security there. Even though right-wing populist motion blames entirely immigrant groups for the problems that occurred in France, and thus they call for a closed-border immigration policy, the French people still want to accept immigrants groups, but with several conditions, namely through immigration policy proposal by Emmanuel Macron and En Marche, which is selective and selects controllable border control. This is in line with the outcome of French election in 2017 and the attitude of French toward immigrants at the time, from which we could see in the next slide, which held a less negative and a less positive perceptions. In the end, French society agreed not to completely close the gap of immigrant groups who want to enter France and integrate. These findings are in line with previous findings that the attitude of French society towards immigrants and refugees is closely related to the more general context of economic and political issues, which mostly then become a populism tool for the right-wing candidates. Here comes the conclusion I've gathered so far. First, the power relation and the identity play a huge part in the five presidential candidates, and the power relation that makes as the rhetoric words that come from these important figures can influence how society defines immigrants, thus forming an immigrant identity. Then, by trying to explain the bigger picture posed in the research problem, the study elaborated that the immigration acceptance established as one of the identity of five presidential candidates, and its party is in the president election in 2017 through aggregating particularly proposed immigration policy with and without leaving the value of position, which is also articulated for the people and the republic. At this point, economic, racial, moral, tolerant, peacekeeping, cooperative value position social groups such as the immigrants and the Muslim are more accommodating as Macron was held as the winner in the elections. To answer the research problem, this paper does pose a definition for immigrant acceptance, which fits into the frames of discussion on our paper. So, this is the end of my presentations. It's been an honor to be among such accomplished individuals and to be able to present our scientific research. Thank you and good day.